Memphis, Tennessee. Beautiful, diverse, southern. It's hard to think of Memphis without thinking about music. While it's home to the birthplace of rock and roll, out of Memphis culture grew a community that loves blues, gospel, jazz, rap, R&B, soul, sports, and delicious barbecue. A bit south of the heart of Memphis and stretching from Midtown and downtown to the Mississippi state line stands one of the oldest communities of this grand city, Riverside, South Memphis. While most focus on the accomplishments of Memphis as a whole, this new podcast, Riverside in Review, sheds light on the incredible names and achievements that have sprung from this significant community in the South. Some you may know and some you may not. From the musical greats like the Queen of Soul herself, Aretha Franklin, to impactful politicians like Benjamin Hooks. On this podcast, we will discuss them all and more. So join me, your host, Demetrius Smith, as I, through in-depth conversations, explore the soul and the soulful history of Riverside, South Memphis. You may ask, why a podcast? Or better yet, why a podcast about South Memphis? The answer for me is simple. It's long overdue. If we allow the local and national media to give us a snapshot of who we are, we will only see crime and poverty. But I know that Riverside, South Memphis is much more than that. While I can admit crime in our city is out of control, we should not accept this one-sided view of who we are. I know that despite the problems facing our community, there are several individuals from among our ranks who are doing tremendous work within and outside of the community. These individuals have garnered considerable momentum, contributing to positive societal influence. Unfortunately, their endeavors go largely unnoticed, since, in my opinion, they don't have the benefit of powerful media to highlight their hard work and accomplishments. Why not create a platform where these individuals can be seen and heard, a place where through an in-depth conversation about the community's rich historical significance and the work of these dedicated individuals, the narrative can shift and we can get a closer, more intimate picture of Riverside, South Memphis.
Hey, baby, what you doing tonight? I'm in town for a little while and I bet you're feeling lonely.
Welcome to Riverside in Review, the podcast that brings you inspiring interviews with remarkable individuals who have made significant progress in the world of social politics, business, entertainment, and beyond. I am your host, Demetrius Smith. Allow me to introduce our first esteemed guest to the very first episode of Riverside in Review, Mr. Tyrone Moore. Tyrone is a proud graduate of George Washington Carver High School, class of 1966. Mr. Moore is a graduate of Columbia University. He holds a certificate in solar energy applications and a master's in public administration from the University of Memphis. With a focus on organizational theory, he further honed his communication skills at San Jose State University and delved into institutional management at the University of Georgia. Tyrone's illustrious career began when he founded Trademarker Enterprise Incorporated, where he has been the chief operating officer since 1988. Offering consultancy to a diverse range of sectors, including real estate and healthcare. His leadership roles include serving as the director of New Memphis Development Corporation and as a research associate for the city of Memphis. Tyrone's commitment to community development is evident through his affiliations, including his tenure as a board member of the University of Memphis and the Valentine Evergreen Community Development Corporation. A man of many talents, Tyrone possesses skills in research organizational development in both private and public sector consultancy. We are honored to have him with us today. Welcome, Mr. Moore, and thanks for joining. I feel like after I read your resume, we can end the podcast, but I'm sure there's more people in here.
Actually, we do make one minor correction. I didn't graduate from Columbia. I attended Columbia in a certification program. So that was that. Yeah, I did my undergraduate work and my graduate work both. It was Memphis State at the time, and maybe when I got my master's, it might have changed to the University of Memphis.
Great. Okay, duly noted.
For the record.
I wanted to start because I know you personally, and I know you've been active many, many years. And I wanted, from your perspective, to get a brief historical account of South Memphis and then give us the present state that you see that we are now experiencing, and what do you see for the future of South Memphis in the Riverside area?
Yeah, really got down to Riverside when I started 7th grade at Carver. And they went from 7th through 12th grade. So that was 1960 when I came. And that's when I really started noticing what was going on over there. At the time, I didn't see things through, say, the eyes of a real estate developer, just as a young man attending 7th grade. So I guess what I noticed, it was a step up really from the neighborhood I lived in. I lived on Florida Street near Crump Boulevard, close to downtown, headed toward downtown.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so our area was probably a little older than the area right around Carver. So the houses were newer, seemed like they were in better shape, and they didn't have, like where I lived, we had houses in the alleys, the back streets, and the bigger streets had the spaces between them, and some of the lots were long enough where they had houses behind the houses, even though the alley separated. So that was early. As I started developing the eyes, I started off working for, that was the New Memphis development thing that you talked about. But prior to that, I had worked for the Chamber of Commerce. And one of the focuses that I had while I was at the Chamber was housing. So that's when I really started looking at it from a professional position. And that was back in the early 70s. And I started my company in kind of the late 80s. So I guess my development eyes tell me that it's a neglected and an underinvested area. And because it's so close to downtown, it's an area that's ripe for outside investors to come in and maybe just do a scorched earth kind of redevelopment. And that's what I want to get ahead of. I don't want to see the people there moved out and then houses that they can't afford to live in constructed and the neighborhood changes. I mean, I don't mind seeing the neighborhood change. I like to see it change. I like to see it come back. So that's kind of like the then and the now.
Okay, and that covers the future of what you see. Presently, I mean, how optimistic are you about these changes?
Well, I got to be optimistic because I'm still involved in and still participating in efforts to bring the neighborhood back. I still go to meetings. I've had meetings as recently as this week to expand the neighborhood and the network of people that's helping to bring the neighborhood back. So I have to be optimistic that it's going to work to whatever degree. I hope it's a total success, but even if we can have the kind of success where we can start turning the neighborhood around. And I don't know how much time I got left, but I don't mind dedicating the time that I do have left, my work career. I plan to live forever. But the work part, I want to get it to a point where I can see that it's moving in the right direction. I have that kind of optimism.
Well, that's good. Now, you've mentioned to me a group that you're working with, the Way Forward Memphis, I believe is the name. How do you raise awareness and mobilize support for these causes that you advocate?
Well, right now, we got probably 2 or 3 approaches that will get our name out, will get the kind of goals that we have established for ourselves. We have met with organizers to participate. We set up a board. We developed that brochure you mentioned that speaks to the way forward and what our strategies are and the network that we're building. We met with the city of Memphis Housing and Development. We want to address the housing stock. We have met with another group that is mostly issue focused. Their issues would include things that we are concerned about, such as the school situation with the kids as early as the 6th grade or the 3rd grade or just in elementary school level grades. The students can get marked so early for failure, and that's not a good sign. If the system is designed to let people fail, and then they got another part of the system that has kind of like the path that failures take. We don't want to see anybody put on a path that will lead to failure. So we got connections and building a network to change that around. The juvenile justice system, they used to treat young kids, particularly kids from our communities, almost like adults, starting when they like 12 years old. So it's just a lot of things that we knew that would be barriers that would have to be addressed to turn things around. The housing, the education, even our political leadership, the people that we select to represent us and represent our interests. Sometimes they end up getting caught in a bigger system that maybe they can see the value of building trolley from downtown to the medical center and spend millions of dollars. Our neighborhoods go underinvested. Just side note, as recently as a few days ago, was taking my car to the mechanic shop. I thought my shocks, I thought my car, I just thought it was tearing up. And the guy said, well, no, everything looks good. Maybe you need to talk to somebody about the streets. So, it's just a lot that's going on with the infrastructure that the public sector should be delivering better services. When I ride outside the neighborhood and I see vacant lots being kept, I look at common areas like median strips on Parkway where the grass is cut and they even got flowers planted and all of that. Well, to me, that indicates a disparity between the kind of public dollars that keep our neighborhoods attractive and the dollars not being spent that make them unattractive.
Right. So what advice do you have for individuals, especially young people? Young people who are on the fence about advocating for community and social change?
Oh, well, I don't know what would create a situation where they would have one foot on one side of the fence and another foot on the other side of the fence. Anybody that can appreciate a better living standard, then you wouldn't be throwing trash in the middle of the street. You wouldn't be going through the neighborhood, setting fires to vacant buildings. You wouldn't pull down the support posts on porches, letting the porch fall in. Most times when people want to keep a neighborhood down, they want that environment so that they could do things that's not good for the neighborhood. I've actually met with law enforcement that talked about gang activities and young people criminal behavior and destroying property and doing destructive things in the community. It makes the older people not feel safe. Matter of fact, it really accelerates deterioration of our neighborhood. So if young people get off the fence, get on the good side where people are trying to improve the neighborhood versus trying to add further destruction in the neighborhood. I just can't see any benefit dragging the neighborhood down. Now, if we got a lot of public disinvestment and we feel like we can make a case to get our politicians and our public administrators to do a better job, I think it's more productive to let's have some kind of exchange with the people that should be doing their part of the job, and then we do a better job on our situation. So yeah, I just keep encouraging them to stay off the fence, don't even get back on the fence.
Okay. Reading your resume, I guess to kind of piggyback off that same question, you have a huge resume. You've done so many different things. But what was the motivation that made you become in my opinion, more of a community activist than a businessman. It almost seems, or you combine the two together, business and community activism. What was the passion? Where did it come from?
Well, it was really something where a big part of the decision was made for me. I did my undergraduate work in the business department out at Memphis State at the time. And so my academic preparation was geared toward me going into business because I came out of a family of entrepreneurs. My grandmother, my extended family on both sides had quite a few entrepreneurs. And though was my grandmother, when I got out of school the first time with my undergraduate degree, I took a job at General Electric, and she was so disappointed. She said, "Is that what they teach you in school, to work for somebody?" So I told her I was working for somebody just to kind of get a toehold and just to learn, the business climate in the city. So I had a plan to eventually have a business.
Riverside High School, changing of the guard, or something more sinister. When Riverside student Carlos Jones agrees to assist the school's guidance counselor in a plot to derail the stellar career of its beloved principal, a sordid culture of competitive politics, reverse racial discrimination, and inappropriate sexual behavior is revealed. The plan threatens not only to destroy the lives of innocent victims, but could also destroy the reputations of the proud inner-city high school. Pick up all 3 copies of this award-winning tale by author Demetrius Smith from Amazon.com. Scandal at Riverside High, Ruth's Revenge, and The Final Bell.
So that was the first education thing beyond high school, was getting a degree in business. And I learned a great deal out of Memphis State, even though we were treated like intruders or something. We wasn't welcome. As a matter of fact, I ended up going to jail because stuff was so crazy. But once I stayed out in the world of work for about 4 or 5 years, I said, well, I'm going to go back and get some more academic training, because a lot of the situation that I was encountering working for the chamber, I knew that if I wanted to lead a chamber and start business, I wanted to know just a little bit more. So I went back and I took the test to go to graduate school. And so most of the people that came out of business, they came back and got a master's in business. So when I went back thinking I was going to get a master's in business, when I took my test, the scores came back and said that I had maybe some kind of pre-advantages going into politics. So I took a few classes in political science, admitted me to the political science graduate school, and I took it. And I didn't know not a whole lot about political science, and my instructor used to tell me, so now you probably challenging too much that you don't understand. But what I didn't understand was how the teaching always used holding Black folks in their place as a political strategy. And I would just argue, but eventually I took enough of the class where I knew how to make a case for my position without it turning into an argument. And so I said, okay, well, I got the kind of training now. I'll put the organizational theory with it, and I'll go back and help organize our community. And that may be my best contribution as compared to, and back at the time, that was the early days of affirmative action. In the business world, most of the Black folks with college education in business, it was in accounting, and I was not interested in being an accountant. So once I went to graduate school in business, I just valued that political science education more than business as a primary focus, I guess. So you're right. Putting that hybrid together, I feel like I got a special role when I go to these meetings, because I can shine a brighter light on something that more people can't really just fathom through imagination, if that makes sense.
Right. You hinted a little bit earlier about longevity, and I know you've been out here for quite some time. I just wanted to ask, how do you prioritize self-care and prevent burnout while dedicating yourself to these causes, community causes?
Well, my joke these days is if I was paying myself, I'd fire myself. I'm still kind of lazy, so I just do what I need to do, enjoy what I do. I feel like I owe it to the community and I owe it to my profession to kind of stay on top of the issues. So when I hear about somebody trying to organize, I'll go. Mostly I'll listen initially, and then once I see some obvious kinds of opportunities to make a different kind of contribution, I'll make those contributions. And if it means following up and maybe doing a little bit more, or maybe identifying some of the people that's working with them to maybe do an orientation session or recommend some kind of networking that they can benefit from. I like the life I'm living. And health-wise, I do have health issues. Most of my peers, my reference group peers, we all got issues. And somebody tried to convince me it ain't gonna get better, but feel like I can still things to improve my quality of life health-wise. So I'm concerned about, eating the right food, getting at least the minimum amount, exercise, and much sleep as I feel like I want. If I stay up late, I'll sleep late, and I don't feel bad.
That brings me to, I guess, my final question. Can you share a success story or a moment that made you realize the positive impact of your activism efforts?
With so many years, don't have those many breakthrough moments. I think just the consistency in not being tripped to get off track. I think maybe it was something negative. When I first started working downtown, when I went downtown, I was a young man, probably 22 or something like that. And the older guys, they really embraced me and gave me their advice, and they were really impressed that I was courageous enough to just speak the truth as I knew it. And I think learning that lesson early, I had a lot of moments where everybody was waiting on Tyrone to tell the truth, and I tried not to disappoint. So if it was something I made, and it sounded like I might be patting myself on the back, but I think my involvements and my connections in the community, I felt like I was representing the whole town. So I had the authority as if I was speaking for the Black community. That might have been the highlight that I still live with.
Okay, for someone now who wants to get in touch with you, and I know the Way Forward Memphis group, if they want to become active and especially young people and helpful, how would they get in touch with you and put their hat in the ring?
Okay, now I do have email address I don't mind sharing. In the Way Forward, we do have a website. Now, we don't have a website manager, so we don't just have that currency of, events from, but at least it will give you a connection. My email address is my name, Tyrone _more 48 @yahoo.com. Now, the other thing with that, a lot of people that I've met, say within the last 15 or 20 years, they don't know me as Tyrone Moore. I introduced myself with my Swahili name, Kanata, and I got that name working with a Janaku. And the Janaku means Free African American Man. And that's another thing that kind of shaped how I approach my community environment. So most people that may see the podcast and say, oh, that's Kanata. Well, it's the same person.
Okay.
You get a better reception as Kanata, but Tyrone still got some of them old ways.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast. I want to thank you again Tyrone Moore, for agreeing to sit down and talk with us. We invite all former and present Riverside, South Memphis residents who would like to be considered as potential guests on our show to kindly complete the guest intake form on our website. If the idea of sharing your story with our audience appeals to you, that's www.riverside.review.com. And I want to thank you again, Tyrone, and I'd like to have you back on the show to do a follow-up on some of the projects that you are involved in at a later date, if that's okay with you.
Very much so. I really see this as part of the outreach. If we can start using technology and social media to get the word out, even in addition with the brochures and the kind of one-on-one outreach, I think it's going to accelerate our impact. So I appreciate you providing this opportunity. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. It sounds good. All right, and there we'll wrap up our very first episode of Riverside in Review, and thank you all for listening.